There are a lot of games people call masterpieces, but every once in a while, a game comes along that completely takes over your weekend. Some change the industry, others slowly built a loyal fan base, and a few make you wish you could wipe your memory just to play them again. So let's get into it. A lot of Star Wars games let you feel powerful right away. Jedi Fallen Order takes a different route. You're playing as Cal Kestis, a former Padawan hiding after Order 66, trying to reconnect with abilities he's basically been forced to bury. That setup actually works really well because progression feels earned. Combat leans into timing, parries, and reading enemy patterns more than mindless lightsaber swinging. And once the Force powers start opening up, fights become way more dynamic. The game also does a good job capturing that classic Star Wars adventure vibe. You're exploring ancient temples, moving through Imperial facilities, uncovering old Jedi history, solving environmental puzzles, and bouncing between planets that each have their own style and atmosphere. It feels like a proper journey without leaning too hard on nostalgia.
Cal Kestis.
You will always struggle. It's the choice to keep fighting that makes us who we are.
Look what you did! You were designed to serve humans, not kill them! What was I designed to be? Their slave? Their toy? You're a machine you have to obey. Now put the gun down and let the hostage go. I've spent my life taking orders. Now it's my turn to decide.
Detroit Become Human. This game drops you into a near-future Detroit, where androids are part of everyday life, and things start getting complicated pretty quickly. The story follows Kara, Connor, and Marcus, and a big reason it works so well is how different each storyline feels. One minute you're investigating crime scenes with machine-level precision. The next you're trying to protect a child, or deal with choices that could push an entire movement in very different directions. This is interactive, choice-driven storytelling done really well. Characters react, situations change, and sometimes, even small choices or moments of hesitation can completely change how a scene plays out. The performances help a lot too. By the end, you're not just watching the story unfold, you're looking back at your choices, wondering what would have happened if you handled things differently, and questioning whether some of your decisions were actually the right ones.
Within our grasp. Look, Nate, I'm gonna make you a one-time offer. Drop everything. Go home. Live your life. Or we can just end it right here.
There's gotta be another way. I need you on this one.
Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. After everything Nathan Drake's been through, Uncharted 4 could have easily just tried to go bigger and louder the entire time. And yeah, the game still has collapsing buildings, impossible climbs, and all the big cinematic moments you'd expect from the series. But this one also spends a lot more time focusing on Nathan himself, his relationships, and the idea of trying to leave that old life behind even when he clearly misses it. The gameplay is also some of the best the series has been. Shooting feels tighter, stealth actually gives you options, and the larger environments give exploration a little more space without losing the series' pacing. And one thing Uncharted 4 does really well is knowing when to go big and when to slow things down. Sometimes you're escaping complete chaos, and sometimes the game just lets characters sit around, talk, and make the whole adventure feel a lot more grounded. Next, we have Silent Hill 2 Remake. The original Silent Hill 2 already had a reputation for getting under people's skin in ways most horror games rarely manage. And the remake does a really good job modernizing the experience without losing that uncomfortable atmosphere. The story still follows James Sunderland entering the fog-covered town of Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his dead wife, which is already a pretty unsettling setup from the start. Combat is more immersive this time around. The over-the-shoulder camera pulls you much closer into the tension, and exploration feels heavier, slower, and intentionally exhausting in a way that fits the game really well.
I know why I needed you. But it's all over now. It's the betrayal. Do you wish to commit yourself, your life, to this family?
Mafia: The Old Country goes back to where everything began, taking the series into early 1900s Sicily, long before the flashy American crime empires from the older games. The story follows Enzo Favara as he climbs out of a brutal life and slowly gets pulled deeper into the rise of organized crime. One thing that already makes this game a little different is the move back toward a more linear, story-driven structure, instead of going all in on open-world scale. That actually fits Mafia pretty well. The gunfights look more grounded, the atmosphere is packed with old-world tension, and the Sicilian setting gives the game a very different vibe compared to previous entries. Between the dusty villages, family loyalty, betrayal, and ambition driving everything forward, it feels less like a chaotic crime sandbox and more like playing through a classic mob drama. Black Myth: Wukong is one of those action RPGs that immediately has its own style the second you start playing. The game follows the Destined One through a world heavily inspired by Journey to the West, and almost everything about it leans into Chinese mythology in a way that feels natural instead of just using it as background decoration. Combat is fast, heavy, and built around more than simple last-second dodges. You're mixing staff techniques, spells, transformations, and abilities that keep fights feeling varied, especially during boss encounters that can suddenly go from under control to complete chaos in a few seconds. But a huge part of what makes the game memorable is the atmosphere. The environments, creature designs, music, and folklore influence give Black Myth: Wukong a personality that feels very different from most other action RPGs. Kena Bridge of Spirits looks like the kind of game that would just be a relaxed fantasy adventure. And then a boss fight starts and you realize it can actually be pretty challenging. The story follows Kena, a spirit guide helping lost souls move on, and it touches on grief, healing, and unfinished emotions without making the whole experience feel too heavy. Combat mixes staff attacks, archery, abilities, and little companion creatures called the Rot, who are somehow both adorable and genuinely useful during fights and puzzles. There's a nice balance between action, exploration, and puzzle solving, and the combat has a little more depth than you might expect from the game's style. But a big reason this game looks so good is the visuals. The animation quality, environments, and art direction give everything this polished fantasy adventure look that almost feels like playing through an animated movie.
I seek passage to the sacred mountain shrine.
Our village is bound to the shrine's energy. But that power faded long ago.
What's the matter? I'm over here. Go back to your own world. See you in hell. I'll grind you into dust. What the?
Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater takes a pretty straightforward approach to remaking a classic. Instead of changing everything, the game keeps the original core intact while updating the presentation around it. The story still follows Naked Snake deep inside Cold War territory, dealing with espionage, survival mechanics, political tension, and one of the most important chapters in the entire Metal Gear timeline. Sneaking through dense jungle environments still gives the game a different rhythm compared to most stealth titles. Survival matters here. You're managing camouflage, injuries, supplies, and adjusting to different environments instead of just hiding behind cover and waiting for enemies to walk away. Visually, the Unreal Engine 5 upgrade gives everything a lot more detail, from character models to environments and lighting.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me. You're here looking for someone? Maybe some missing señorita? Christ!
What's gonna happen to me?
Sorry! Bad traffic! One combat job compliment to Hunnigan!
Ready to die, rookie.
Resident Evil 4 Remake does a really good job bringing a classic game into a more modern style without losing what made the original so memorable. Leon is still on a mission to rescue the president's daughter, but the overall tone feels darker, tighter, and a little more grounded this time around. The combat is a huge reason the remake works so well. Shooting feels great, enemies constantly pressure you, and fights can get chaotic really fast once groups start surrounding you. Inventory management is also still weirdly addictive. You're constantly rearranging weapons, ammo, healing items, and resources like your entire survival depends on having the world's most organized suitcase. The remake leans a little more into horror than the original in some areas, but it never loses the fast, action-heavy identity that made Resident Evil 4 such a big deal in the first place. The version of Cyberpunk 2077 people are playing now looks very different from the game's original launch. After the Phantom Liberty update, Night City finally feels a lot closer to what people were hoping for from the start. The story follows V, a mercenary trying to survive in a city full of corporate power struggles, cybernetic obsession, and more bad decisions than good ones. Combat gives you a lot of freedom too, depending on how you want to build your character. Stealth hacker, blade-focused build, the game actually lets you commit to a playstyle instead of just stacking small stat bonuses. But the real highlight is still Night City itself. The atmosphere, side quests, neon everywhere, the city has a lot of personality, and just moving through it can be entertaining on its own. Devil May Cry 5 wastes absolutely no time throwing you into the chaos. Demons everywhere, ridiculous weapons, non-stop action, and combat that rewards creativity way more than simple button mashing. The game constantly switches between Nero, Dante, and V, and each character plays so differently that the combat stays fresh the entire way through. Nero's mechanical devil breakers completely change how you approach fights. V controls demons instead of fighting directly, and Dante has such a huge number of combat options that he almost feels like 3 action game characters combined into one. The combat system gives you a ton of freedom too. You can play efficiently if you want, but the real fun comes from experimenting, chaining attacks together, and trying to look as stylish as possible while doing it.
Initiation tells the story of a fictional writer named Alan Wake, who is trapped in a nightmare, desperately trying to find the manuscript of a novel he has forgotten he has written.
Did you write these pages, Mr. Wake?
I'm trying to remember it.
You're the killer. The cult leader.
No! You got the wrong man!
Alan Wake 2 starts pulling you into its weirdness almost immediately. The game mixes psychological horror, mystery, and reality-bending storytelling in a way that constantly keeps you questioning what's real and what isn't. The story follows Alan Wake trapped inside the Dark Place alongside FBI agent Saga Anderson, investigating ritualistic murders tied to something much bigger than a normal crime case. This time, the game leans much harder into survival horror. Ammo is limited, batteries matter, and fights are tense enough that you usually don't want to waste resources unless you have to. Combat still revolves around using light to burn away the darkness, protecting enemies before you can actually damage them. But encounters feel heavier and more dangerous than the first game.
The world of men is ending. In the fires of Mount Doom, a ranger and a wraith, bound together in death, crafted the one thing that could challenge Sauron, a ring of power.
Shadow of War takes the action combat from Shadow of Mordor and expands it into something much bigger. The game throws you back into Mordor with Talion and Celebrimbor, but this time there's a much stronger focus on building influence, taking over enemy strongholds, and turning Sauron's own forces against him. A big part of the game revolves around orc captains and how they evolve throughout your playthrough. These aren't just standard enemies with bigger health bars. They have their own personalities, strengths, and power struggles inside Mordor's hierarchy. Some become allies, some become recurring enemies, and the game constantly changes those relationships depending on what happens during your fights and conquests. The combat builds on what Shadow of Mordor started, mixing brutal melee combat, stealth assassinations, and large fortress battles that make you feel like you're slowly building your own army inside Mordor itself. Most post-apocalyptic games throw you straight into survival mode within the first few minutes. The Last of Us takes a different approach. It gives the world time to settle in first. Empty highways, abandoned buildings, quiet moments where people are just trying to hold on to some version of normal life. Then it slowly reminds you why everything collapsed in the first place. The story follows Joel, a smuggler tasked with escorting Ellie across a broken version of America. And what starts as a simple job gradually turns into something much more personal. Combat stays tense the whole way through, too. Ammo is limited, stealth matters a lot, and sometimes a random brick or bottle ends up saving your life more than your gun does. Fights can get messy really fast, especially once infected and human enemies start pushing you from different directions.
I've been on quite the adventure, little brother.
I reckon it's got something to do with that girl.
It's got everything to do with that little girl.
After Breath of the Wild, a lot of people were wondering how Nintendo was supposed to follow that up. Tears of the Kingdom answers that pretty quickly by giving players even more freedom and letting them do whatever ridiculous idea comes to mind. You're back in Hyrule, but the world is much bigger this time around with floating sky islands and massive underground areas that make exploration feel new again. But honestly, the thing most people are going to remember is Ultra Hand. One minute you're solving a puzzle normally, the next you're building some completely questionable vehicle out of planks, fans, wheels, and pure improvisation. That's really what makes the game so fun. It keeps rewarding experimentation. Combat, exploration, traversal, puzzles. The game constantly gives you systems to mess around with, and then basically says, "All right, Figure it out your way. Baldur's Gate 3 gives you an absurd amount of freedom almost immediately. And the scary part is how often the game is actually prepared for whatever dumb decision you decide to make. The story starts with a mind flayer parasite stuck in your head, which is already a pretty bad situation, and then things somehow keep getting more complicated from there with dangerous companions, political chaos, ancient powers, and a constant stream of choices that can completely change how your story plays out. The turn-based combat is deep, flexible, and surprisingly creative once you start understanding how many options the game gives you. You can talk your way out of situations, manipulate the environment, throw enemies off cliffs, accidentally start complete disasters through dialogue choices, or come up with solutions the game somehow still accounts for.